Our guest on today's episode of the Meinl Radio podcast is Meinl cymbals artist Madden Klass. A native of New York, currently living in California, and seemingly always on tour, Madden has spent the last few years dedicating her time and energy into creating a career as a full-time professional musician. Whether she's on tour or in the studio, Madden has kept her resume filled with a very diverse array of musical scenarios. Space Junk is Forever, Mike Doty, Vroom, Big Wild, Wheatus, Watsky, and Boy Genius. Madden has placed herself squarely into each of these situations with an intensity to bring the best of her abilities as is possible. During the podcast, Madden talks about how she preps for all of her gigs through transcribing everything ahead of time. It's really inspiring to hear how ready she is for everything she does. While it could seem daunting to know that the bar has been set so high for being ready for a gig, we should all actually thank Madden for raising said bar. As a rising tide lifts all boats, as the expression goes. I talk about it during the podcast, but I saw Madden just a couple of months ago in Nashville while she was on tour with Boy Genius. The last time I'd seen her play was the year COVID hit. We had Madden travel to Nashville to film content with us. She wasn't even out of Berkeley College of Music yet, and already she was playing with maturity well beyond her years. Fast forward to a few months ago, and it was great to hear, and totally not surprising, at how focused and just how pro her drumming sounded, backing up Boy Genius. That band goes from a whisper to a seriously loud pop overdrive, and Madden steered the ship with total ease. You might be familiar with Madden from her Instagram page, where she uploads informal but great-sounding clips of her drumming in her basement in New York. At least, I think it's her basement. She talks about it during the podcast, so we can verify there. But, nonetheless, this very Instagram page was how I found out about her in the first place. She explained during the podcast that it's been an incredibly useful tool to help advance her career. And what a career she's had so far. So without further ado, on to the podcast. I'd like to welcome everybody into the Meinl Radio podcast. Today we've got Madden Klass, the awesome drummer from New York, who right now is talking to me from Los Angeles. Madden, thank you so much for being on the show.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Absolutely. Well, I was looking at your website recently, which I'm going to give you a shameless plug here. It's maddenklassdrums.com.
Thank you. Work in progress.
No, it looks great. It's a really nice looking site. Well, did you create the site or did you have a friend do it for you or who did it?
I did create it. Yeah, a fun pastime on many flights. But I always think it could be better. I was recently looking at Ash Sowen's website and it just put mine to absolute shame. So I'll be trying to mimic his or use it as a model for what mine can be. But thanks for the shout out.
Yeah, well, I was looking at it and to my eyes, it looked really good. And
thank you.
This is weird. Okay, so I feel like I sort of felt like when I was looking at it that I recognized the general font that you used from, like, it was from another life that I felt like I recognized it. So, okay, this is how much of a nerd I am. It only took me a second to check and see if the hunch I had was correct, and sure enough, it was. So the first time I ever saw the font that's all over your website, it was on a record that came out in 1991 it was a one-off album by a band called Temple of the Dog. Do you know that album?
I don't know the record. I know the band, but is this the font that like all of the like the tops of the paragraphs are in, like the main title fonts?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a really cool font, but like, so yeah, that record was back when the Seattle grunge scene just like exploded.
Yeah.
Chris Cornell from Soundgarden, he was best friends with this singer named Andrew Wood who sang for Mother Love Bone. So Andrew Wood from Mother Love Bone died, and then the band that came from Mother Love Bone was Pearl Jam. And so some of the dudes from Pearl Jam, a couple of the dudes from Soundgarden, they got together and made this one-off record that was a tribute to Andrew, and it was, like, for my money, the best record of that whole era.
I didn't know all the history behind that band.
Yeah, so anybody that's a fan of Matt Cameron from Soundgarden, that drummer who's a really great drummer, that's him. He's all over that record. Anyway.
That is so funny. That font just had the most character to me. Everything else was not working, and I needed something generic that was built into the website. Yep. I wish I knew what it was called, but that's hilarious that you clocked that.
Yeah, I'm a like I said, I'm a pretty big nerd. So as you know, but the listeners do not know. My 15-year-old daughter is a massive Phoebe Bridgers fan, a massive Boy Genius fan, and it was so great being able to take her to the Boy Genius show in Nashville this summer and watch you play. While the three
I'm so
artists,
glad.
oh yeah, no, it was great. It was so hot, but we
Oh
had,
my God, it was messed up. And
yeah,
did we push that set earlier? Was there like
you
an
did.
incoming storm? Oh yeah, yeah. So even worse. Oh my God. TK was playing at 3 p.m. So
Yeah.
brutal.
Yep, it was really hot, but it was great. And, so while the three artists that are the focal point of the bands, if for anybody that doesn't know, Boy Genius is the band I'm referring to that Madden has been playing drums for some time now. She was on a summer tour with them. They were doing a thing called the Reset Festival. And it has three artists that front the band. And they're the focal point. They're all really good friends. They've got a super special bond. You can see it from the crowd. And I imagine that there are, at the end of the day, three distinct personalities that you have to navigate. So, how do you, as a hired touring drummer for Boy Genius, navigate those wants and needs of multiple band leaders in one band?
Um, yeah, I mean, they're very different from each other, but they almost move as one unit. Um, their bond is super strong, so it felt always like we were working between two units, that being the artist and the band. And I felt like our personalities just all meshed really well. And it was never really one person taking the lead. They all we all were bouncing ideas off each other. They would bounce ideas off each other. Um, and it's a very equal and fair environment, and you can hear that just in their music because as we move through the set, we don't really know how they decided to build the set list, but we realized over time that it was a pattern of Julian having a lead song, then Lucy, then Phoebe, and that kept cycling all throughout the set. So it wasn't predominantly one voice that you were hearing. So yeah, I think it happened pretty naturally just by the way they run their ship. Um, there was room for us all to collaborate and share ideas and share time together, and it didn't feel like one voice was dominating at any point. It was a really great environment.
That's awesome. It sounds like it was completely smooth sailing.
It really was. It was, yeah. It was pretty awesome to have so many people on the tour who all had their own role and purpose to serve. And to my knowledge, it didn't seem like anyone had to bite off more than they could chew. Everybody had their job and their place, and it created for a really nice working environment. Because
Wow.
I've been on tours where people are doing way more than they should have to, but that just requires more teamwork and patience and understanding, that should always be happening. But it was nice to see everybody, coming in with a smile on their face and doing what they're best at and not having to, just overwork themselves.
Hmm.
Unless they were
Well,
just putting on a face for us. But I think everyone was pretty happy.
that sounds like it. That's great.
Yeah.
What was the most challenging aspect of settling in comfortably to that gig? Were there any skill sets that you may have had but maybe weren't being utilized much prior to that particular gig? Skill sets that you had to get back up to snuff quickly, or yeah, what did you have to make sure you were on top of?
I had to assess the way I sounded. Um, yeah, I had to listen back to my playing and really make sure I was doing the record a service because a lot of the projects I've done and the people I've played for in the last like 2 or 3 years have been pretty pop heavy. Um, that not so much when I started playing with Wheatus and Mike Doty, but in the last 2 years, it's been a lot of pop acts. Either pop acts with a super rigid click, really on the grid, lots of backing tracks, or nothing at all. So it was just one or the other. And this was kind of a combination of the two where there was some click, but no backing tracks. So I really had to make sure that I was not obeying the click more than the music itself, because I tend to try and be as on the grid as possible. And when I would listen back to how they were playing guitar, they were playing it with a lot of character and ebb and flow. It wasn't supposed to be really rigid, and you can hear that on the record. So I had to listen back and adjust my playing and make sure I was listening to the band more than the click and just using the click as a guide.
Yeah, I guess it could be really easy, almost like sort of, I don't know what the right word I'm trying to search for is. It be sort of a like something that you fall back and rely on way too much with a click.
Right.
Were given the ebb and flow you talked about, were there ever any times where you had to like quickly scramble and turn off the click? Since there weren't backing tracks, did you have to turn off the click just to make sure that you were in sync with wherever someone's playing was going and then you could turn it back on? Did that ever
Do
happen?
you mean like metaphorically in my brain
No, I mean
tune out the
physically.
click?
Physically.
Oh, well, everything would fall apart if I had ever shut the click off. There was one show, there's a big section in one of the songs called Anti Curse where everybody is playing downbeats for 4 measures, and I'm hitting the crash, huge 22-inch Foundry ride, and it's taking up a lot of space, and I was so in the moment and hitting so hard that I wasn't thinking about the click. We were all on the same page. It was as if there was no click. And then when I came back in to the next section, which is like a build, I was way off. And I had to stop for a moment, stretch out the downbeats until we were all back in place and we all looked at each other like, oh my God, we just fell off the rails, but we came back on so quick. And it was a funny, exciting moment, but I never tuned out that section again because I did not want that to happen.
Oh,
But
dude.
we
Yeah.
we we learned that it happens and we can get back on track really quick. But that was all me. That was my doing, and I had to correct it very quickly.
Man, when a drummer gets off of a click during a show and it feels like, and I'm not saying this for you, but just it happened to me once. It felt like it was tough to like rein it back in. And
Right.
it may have lasted for a grand total of 3 seconds, maybe five, but holy
hmm
crap, it feels like it lasts a lifetime. It's like one of those dreams where you're falling. It's
Yeah.
terrifying.
That split second of time where I had to figure out how we were going to get back to where we were, we really did just stretch out the beat for a moment. But it was easier because I was entirely in control of it. It's not like one of the guitars went way ahead and I had to signal to them, hey, that's not where we're at. It was all my doing, so I was able to fix it pretty quick. And, I think they trusted me. So
That's
it
awesome.
worked out. It didn't fall apart, thankfully.
Well, you were talking about the different gigs you've been doing for the last few years. And so you played all manner of gigs and with that, all manner of venues. And some of the locations you played are really historic. I actually happened to see that when I was on your website, that there were some venues where it was like, wow, she got to play Madison Square Garden, which I assume as a native New Yorker was pretty special. And so
It was amazing.
yeah, I imagine that there are some of these venues, these gigs and venues that have struck a real chord in you getting to play them for the first time. Do you mind to share with all of us some of the more special moments, like venues and shows and things that really stick out? It doesn't just have to be with Boy Genius, it could be anything.
Right, absolutely. I mean, even like the first, I'll shout out Nashville. That was like the first big real show I had ever played was at the Basement East with Mike Doty. That was number one. We did like a warm-up show in Virginia Beach. It was about 60 people. And then the Basement East was the real first show. And I think it's like, I don't know, maybe 250 cap, maybe more, maybe less. That one was super special. Just because it was, it was a standing room. I was up on a tall stage, and I had never done anything like that before. I'd never been brought in on a tour to that degree. So that one always feels super special to me. And on that tour, playing Bowery Ballroom, I'd been there, you know, during my like high school years to see shows, even Great American Music Hall in San Francisco. This is all from that same first tour. So many venues stick out to me because it was a lot of firsts. And then on Boy Genius, we played Red Rocks, which was, of course, incredible. Although it was super windy at first, so that was different, uncharted territory. My hair was like blowing in my face. I couldn't see, but it's settled down after a while. But that was an unbelievable experience. And I walked through that famous stairwell. I didn't even realize that I was just running around the venue, and I came across the stairwell where everyone writes their names. I wish I had a Sharpie, but I just walked through. But yeah, it's been amazing. I've loved playing the different festivals like Austin City Limits, Coachella. It's all been such a blast.
Mm.
And there are more I want to play. Of
Oh
course.
yeah, no, I'm sure. Well, so like out of the New York gigs you've done, you mentioned the Bowery. How did playing Bowery compare to say the Garden? Which one was more special for you, or were they equally in just different ways?
Definitely in different ways. The first time I played MSG, it was for Jingle Ball, and our set time ran 11 minutes and 30 seconds. So it was over before I knew it, and it was super overwhelming. It was being filmed, so that was a whole different aspect. I'm very, very excited to play it in like a week and a half or 2 weeks. I'm playing Madison Square Garden with Boy Genius, and that one will give me the chance to really settle in and appreciate the experience before it ends, because we're going to play like an hour 30, an hour 45. So I will really have the chance to sit there and soak it up. Whereas before it was a quick in and out. And those opening sets are so overwhelming. The artist is kind of nervous, as we all are. So you're really thinking about them. But this one will have time to settle in and enjoy it. And hopefully I won't be crying on stage. Hopefully I won't settle in too much, but it's
Yeah, no.
possible. It's
Well,
happened at a couple of Boy Genius shows. They're so overwhelming and amazing.
you mean like an emotional response that you have?
Yeah, yeah, all of us. There's been so many shows where we all look at each other and we're tearing up because of something special that happens in the audience, or yeah, just a overwhelming show.
I mean, dude, the connection that the band, the artists and the band have with the crowd was crazy. I walked into that show. It's funny. I walked into that show. I mean, of course, I had heard Boy Genius because my daughter's playing it around the house and all that. But like,
Yeah.
I'd never put it on in the car of my own volition. Where one time I was like, you know what, I'm going to stop this Iron Maiden like album and put on some Boy Genius. But I knew what I was getting into, but what I didn't know was the crazy connection, a good connection that everybody had.
Right.
It's really neat when you go to a show that you're not that familiar with the band, but you can
Yeah.
tell everybody is celebrating being there. It makes it really fun to it's kind of like you're sort of like standing outside the club and appreciating it, but at the same time, no one's giving you a hard time for being there. So
Yeah.
it was a cool experience.
Yeah, it's a different way of viewing it for sure.
Yeah.
Not
Well,
not being like a super fan.
exactly. Will your family be at the garden show?
Yes, of course. Me and my other bandmate who's from New York were like, "Hey, if you have any extra guest list spots, let us know." Cause yeah, we're trying to bring as many people as we can. I'm gonna bring hopefully my old drum teacher who I studied with for 8 years, 9 years. No, yeah, 9 years. I think it would be so special if he came. So, yeah, I'm trying to have family friends there. I'd love if my grandparents could come. So we're gonna see how many people we could swing.
That's awesome.
Make the
Well,
most of it.
you were talking about your drum teacher, so that makes me think about this. Now, you grew up playing drums and then went to Berkeley College of Music to further your study. Did you stay all 4 years at Berkeley?
So I was very close to finishing. I was on campus for 3 semesters, fall of 2017 and all of 2018, and then I started touring with Mike Doty and Wheatus all of 2019. So I left in that time. I did a summer semester at Berkeley in between the spring and fall tour. And then I came back to Berkeley in 2020, and obviously we all went home. And I was able to get a lot of my schooling done from home, which was actually a very fruitful time because I was able to learn to record, and I had the luxury of being home and being in my basement and messing with gear and just experimenting all the time. Like, I honestly think back on it as such a fun time. It was a huge growth period for me, even though I was stuck in my basement. I just had a ton of time to learn and experiment. But I did not finish. I was really close. I have 1 semester left, and it's basically all liberal arts classes and like a final capstone project. So I am a Berkeley, I don't know. I guess you could consider me a Berkeley alumni, but not a Berkeley grad.
Yeah, no, I mean Berkeley's a funny thing, and I'm sure there's other schools that are like this too. But in an industry that doesn't require undergrad degrees per se to be able to get a job or a gig or what have you, it's Berkeley's one of those places where it's just kind of acceptable. Like, yeah, no, I only did 2 years and then immediately got on the road, and you hear that all the time. And
Right.
then I hear that more from from people than I do from people who say, yeah, I finished all 4 years. And nothing wrong with the people that finished 4 years. I mean, guys like Matt Garska did all 4 years.
Right, right.
So
Yeah,
clearly it's fine if you do. But yeah,
of
no,
course.
that tracks pretty accurately with a lot of other people also.
Right. Yeah, I'd definitely be interested in finishing and just squeezing in a couple more classes if I could. But yeah, I just couldn't pack in enough credits during COVID. I couldn't sit in front of my computer for hours and hours a day. But I was really so close, and COVID gave me the opportunity to do a lot of that schooling. I think I would have continued touring more had it not happened.
Yeah, no, sure. Well, what do you think that your time at Berkeley did for you as a player?
I mean, it was the time that I locked myself in a room the most. That was my opportunity to just hide away and shed and be inspired. I also played with so many groups and original projects while I was at Berkeley. That was like the majority of what I was doing was playing gigs on the weekend and going and doing band rehearsals multiple times a week and just writing, learning to write, learning about production, learning to record. So it just totally opened my world and got me writing on the kit and thinking about what role I play in a song and for an artist. And I think it just really set me up. So I was doing a lot of my experiences were happening outside of Berkeley in terms of performance because I was a performance major until I switched to professional music, but most of my performing happened outside of school. So it
And
was just a good city to be in. A lot of good people.
yeah, no, Boston's incredible.
Yeah.
Now, you had mentioned your drum teacher possibly coming out to the show at the Garden, and you said you had taken lessons with your teacher for about 8 or 9 years. So I'm not really sure the timeline of when you stopped taking lessons with this teacher, but did your lessons with this teacher lead right up to your applying to Berkeley?
Exactly. Yeah, I moved to I live in Hop Hog, New York. That's where I'm from. And when I moved there when I was 9, my dad searched for a drum teacher and he found this guy, Peter Greco, who was living in Huntington, New York. And he messaged him, and my dad was like, "Hey, my daughter is learning to play drums. Like, She's pretty good. She needs somebody to take her to the next level. Would you be interested in teaching her? And he was like, no, I don't teach kids. I'm sorry. I only teach adults. And my dad was like, please give her a chance. I think she can, I think she can hang with what you'd want to teach. Can she come in and you decide after meeting her? So I went in and he opened a couple books for me and I played, and then he started teaching me, and he teaches kids. He's taught kids since then, which I think was like 2008. So he's an amazing guy, and he completely set me up to be the player I am today. Did I mention his name? His name is Peter Greco.
You did. Now,
I think I did, yeah.
You did. Now, did Peter actually help you get everything together to submit your materials to Berkeley? As far as like when you decided what you were going to submit as samples of your playing, did he have any input on that, or how did that work?
It's kind of hard to remember because I recorded all of my auditions from home, but honestly, I'm sure that we worked on those tunes together. Actually, yes, we did. He had me play Island Magic by Dave Weckl. Of course. That was his thing. Fusion, big band. So yes, he definitely set me up with the repertoire. We would shed it together. And for my whole life, I had to play in front of judges. It's something that you have to do in New York. I had to play snare pieces, drum set pieces, and yeah, it's a very studious environment, which I loved. But he's also such a fun guy and such a great player.
Well, so okay, you leave Berkeley, you get out on the road, and did you have a moment, just a little private moment to yourself, where it totally dawned on you that you were doing it, that you were actually making a career out of playing the drums for a living?
Totally. When I was first, when I did that first tour with Mike Doty, I was completely blown away. And I knew that this was the right thing for me. But it also, just my whole life, it was just always happening. I wasn't thinking about it too hard. Even when I posted on Instagram, I wasn't giving it much thought. I wasn't really like reaching. I knew what I wanted, but it wasn't an active thought that these are the steps I need to take to get to this place. It was just happening, and I always loved music. I loved playing music, writing music. So I just sort of followed that path. And yeah, of course, when I started touring, and even now, especially now when I look back at what I've done the past few years, that's when I think to myself, I'm really doing it. And I just want to keep it going. And I'm so grateful for where it's taken me so far. So that reflection is happening right now.
No, it's happening right now. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, so it sounds to me like if I had to sum up the Madden Klass philosophy of making stuff happen, it would just be to do as many of the right things as possible as you see those right things to be, but don't hyper focus on the importance of them or the like absolute business nature of them, or just you don't get too stuck into the details. You just kind of have a mental checklist of, well, I probably should do this, I probably should do that, I'm going to do this, and then you kind of know that the fruits of your labor will be the sum of all the parts, basically, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, of course, now I'm putting more thought into it and having to make decisions and, like, unfortunately leave some things behind that I once loved, like playing in original projects. But now I have to make sure I'm doing the things that will keep me moving forward until I can get to a point where I can just make the choices for me. But luckily, every choice I've made so far has been what I've wanted, and it's all leading to the right place.
That's great. What a good feeling
Yeah.
to have, to know that just each
It is
step
great.
is working.
Yeah, definitely.
And so from my outside point of view, along with all of the technical things you're doing correctly and the decisions you're making regarding your own business and things like that, you're doing all that right, but like you're just a good person. So I think that a lot of the aspect of being a good person comes into play also. In all the time that you've toured, have you seen any examples of what being less than a good person will do to somebody who has the talent and the skill, but because they were not too great as, as an individual, it just kind of sank their battleship. Have you seen any of that go down?
I'm trying to think.
Or have you been so fortunate to be on tour with nothing but killer people all the
I mean
time?
that's what I was gonna say. Like I was trying to think of somebody outside of my touring experiences, but everybody I have toured with has been so friendly, so sweet. Like it's been just the most rewarding environment to be in, and that's why those people are on tour. I think the ones who are allowing themselves to crash and burn because of their attitude, they just don't even make it on tour. It's you won't be asked to be involved if you have a bad attitude. So, yeah, I mean, I've been on the road with people who have had like mental health issues, but that's normal. It's not a super easy environment, and sometimes people have had to leave tours, and we all just try to be supportive of that and see how far we can bring them along until we realize it's not a good fit anymore. But yeah, for the most part, everybody I've worked with, no matter what size it is, has been like so pleasant to be around.
Wow, that's really lucky.
It is. It's hard when when something conflicts, when I have to take one thing over the other because I want to do every project that I've been involved in all the time. So when there's a year where I get to tour with like 5 different artists, I'm usually very happy because everyone I work with is so great.
That's awesome. Well, talking
Yeah.
about your steps that you've taken, so you recently relocated to LA. Do you mind sharing with us what prompted that move as far as business goes?
Yeah. So I have been coming out here a lot for work and staying with my partner and our friend. And the work is not consistent, so I'm figuring that out because I would get a call last minute to come out here for 2 3 weeks to do rehearsals for a tour. And this year that was happening a lot because of Boy Genius, and the schedule was up in the air, so I was just staying here a lot. And I know a lot of people I've toured with settle here, and they had a spot open up in this house, so I decided to take it, even though I will probably only be here 3 to 4 months a year between touring and being at my home in New York, which has my family. My whole family lives there except for my sister, and I have all of my studio set up, all my drums, all my cymbals, a lot of gear. So it was kind of hard to make the decision, but I wanted to do something bold, and I really wanted to be able to tell people that I have a spot here and see what happens, see if it leads to more recordings. And just, I've talked to some music directors who say they won't hire if you don't live out of LA because they don't want to house people. So yeah, I'm kind of just giving it a shot. I had been here enough to feel that it made sense to make a more permanent situation out of it. So I'm just rocking my electric kit right now in the house, and I'll hopefully get a better setup as time goes on.
All right, so let's say you get a call after we're done here with this podcast. You get a call from
Sick.
somebody who needs you to come out tomorrow for a session. Just they want you to come lay down some tracks. Going to be a pretty
Yeah.
cool deal. Where are you going to go get a kit?
Oh, if they want me to bring my own kit,
Yes.
where will I get a kit? I'll go on Instagram, and whichever drummer comes up first, that's from LA. I'll just send them a really nice message and throw them a couple of bucks. But I do know enough drummers out here that I think someone would be willing to lend it. Also, my partner, their family has a drum set here that's set up in her old bedroom, so I could probably use that too.
Awesome.
Or
Okay.
you know what? I'll just buy a kit, maybe return it in a few days, do something sneaky.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'll have a kit here soon enough. As soon as the Boy Genius tour is over.
Well, wait, you do remember that you're a Ludwig artist, right?
I do.
So you could
yes,
easily call your guy at Ludwig, say, "Ooh,
that is
hey
also
man,"
true. That is
and
also true.
he could hook you up with SIR or
Oh, for
center staging,
sure.
and yeah, you'd be good.
Oh yeah. That, you know what? That's a way better idea. Go to SIR.
Right.
Hopefully, they give me the endorser rate, and yeah, just charge a little extra for the session to
That's
make up
right.
for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so back in New York, you had a good setup. You'd mentioned this, like during COVID, you got your recording game down, you got your whole setup for putting content on socials. And so, with being in LA only, I guess you said maybe 3, 4 months out of the year, is keeping up with socials, your content creation, something that you're interested in doing? And if so, you think you'll be able to do it?
Absolutely. I have slowed down with making videos. I used to make videos like every day, and when I'm home, I still do because I love to do it. But I've wanted my Instagram to become more of a reflection of my resume. So I'm trying to post a lot of live videos and tour posters so people can see what I'm really doing. But yeah, I would still love to put out covers. So yeah, I'm hoping by early next year I can get in a practice space, hopefully share it with somebody else who I vibe with, and they want a similar space that I do. They want to keep the space, neat and functional. And then I would start pumping out content again. But it's not a huge priority because I've done it already for a long time, and I feel super fortunate to have built up a following to the point where I don't feel like that's something I have to think about all the time. It's just
Yeah.
kind of there for me to use when I want.
Well, all right. So I'm going to throw out something you said that I like, and I'm going to point to a personal gripe. I try not to complain, but now that we're talking about it, some people can take this as good advice or maybe bad advice. I don't know. You mentioned that you were trying to take your Instagram page and make it a bit more of a resume, showing what you've been doing. And I love that idea. And oftentimes I'll get sent applications from people who'd like to possibly be endorsed, or they'd like to endorse Meinl. And when I look at their socials, oh, it drives me nuts. And what I want to tell them is, please have two Instagram pages. Have one for all of your personal stuff where you talk about all of your viewpoints on politics and
Right.
religion and all the things that are generally taboo to bring up in polite company.
Yeah.
And then have a page that's strictly for your career, just for drumming,
Yeah.
just for business. And the amount of people I see who mix the two and confuse the issue for those who maybe would just like to be there to check out what this person would be like to work with, it drives me insane. So I really appreciate the fact that you keep yours so neat and tidy. That's awesome.
Yeah, I was actually thinking to do what most people already have, but would be the flip, is to actually make a personal page that is completely separate from drumming. So I'm actually inclined to post about my travels and my friendships and just anything that is fun and exciting that I'd love to share with my family that I'm not sharing because I try to keep my Instagram really tidy and just a resume for people to, you know, just see what's going on with not a lot of fluff. I feel like that's what stories are for. It's a good medium to posting about your daily life.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm wondering, is there anything that you can point to and say, hey, that was a direct result of all the content that I've posted on socials? Anything come from your Instagram page? It's okay if it didn't. I'm just curious if something did.
Well, you came from my Instagram page. Is that what you're asking? Like any
I wasn't gonna
endorsements?
say
Oh,
that,
you were
but
gonna say
I wasn't sure if it occurred to you or not. I was just curious.
Oh yeah. I mean, you
Besides
were the
Meinl.
first. You were the first. Yeah. I mean, all of the endorsements came from Instagram.
Oh wait, let's
But
just say this again. Who was the first?
Ludwig. No, I'm just kidding. They were like they might have been the second actually. Yeah, I was just in my Berkeley practice room, and Vlade was always practicing across the way. And I guess I didn't even ask him to do this, but I played almost all Meinl symbols my whole life. And he, I guess, felt inclined to send my name to you. And you said you had reached out already like a
Yep.
few days prior. It's just so crazy. I never asked him to do that. I don't think, unless it happened in passing and I don't remember. But yeah, shout out Vlade. That was
Yeah, no, it wouldn't
super,
surprise me if
super
he had.
sweet.
Yeah, he probably did it unsolicited because he's just. And by the way, everybody, we're talking about a guy named Vlade Guigny. He's a Meinl symbols artist, Meinl stick and brush artist, and this guy is an incredible player and a very, very special human being.
Yeah, I saw him play for the first time in 2016 when I went to the Berkeley 5-week program. And I always looked up to him, and it meant a lot that he believed in me and sent my name your way.
That's awesome. Well, okay, so aside from Meinl and Ludwig, did you ever have any gigs that came
Yeah,
from? Yeah.
all of them.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure. I mean, it's also word of mouth. I don't think it's like somebody just stumbled upon my page, but it was just a good landing page for them. If my name was floated to someone, they could just go straight to my Instagram and verify if I was skilled enough to take the gig. So I think every single gig I've done, I have Instagram to thank for being, just a great platform to put all of my videos in, a pretty casual way. It's just me and my drums and no, it's not, I don't use a crazy camera or anything, but I do care a lot about the way it sounds. But yeah, everybody has pretty much sent me a message on Instagram or an email. So yeah,
Wow. That's awesome. I love
yeah,
it. Well,
super convenient.
you seem to me like a drummer that can sit in most any musical situation, but are there genres that you might be able to tackle, but that gives you a bit of butterflies thinking about having to do so? And so how would you prepare for that situation? Do you have any deep dive techniques that you utilize for crash course familiarizations?
I mean, pop and hip hop are the most daunting for sure. That's the genre that I did not play growing up, and there's no super right way to do it. But the sound is really gospel chops and figuring out how to accentuate what's already going on. So I think it requires the most creativity. And I just recently did the Watsky gig, which was an absolute dream. I was a huge fan of his. I saw him back in high school. So when I got that message on Instagram, I just made sure that I was available and I would nail it. And I knew it was going to be a tough one to prepare for because he had such monster players for years prior. He's been touring for like about 10 years and he's just had amazing players come and go. So as much as was available to me online, I transcribed from his last drummer who is named Kuti Haj. And he's a monster chopper, amazing groove. He just did things that I wouldn't have thought to do, really cool fills. So I literally transcribed it verbatim. I knew I had 2 months to prep for it, and I wanted to learn and sound like him and, see how I could apply my sound to that situation while pulling from another drummer who had already nailed it. There was no reason to not try and sound like him. So, yeah. Transcribing has been everything for me in my professional life. Yeah.
That makes total sense because the act of actually writing information down, of taking it from, if you're reading it in a book and then you make notes about it on paper, or if you're watching it on a video, make notes about it on paper, rather than maybe repeating it out loud, just writing it down. I know there's somebody who could really explain the synapses in the brain and the subtle nuances of
Right.
why it works, but it's one of those techniques that works for pretty much anything. If you're just in high school and you're taking notes on something and maybe you write those
Yeah.
notes out again, it's same thing for transcription. It's neat to see it actually work.
It's so much more work to play it and try to ear it out. I mean, it'd probably be just as good of an exercise for me. But honestly, transcribing in a way, it feels like not the lazy approach because it's not easy to do, but it just makes the whole process so much simpler. And then I have a reference that I can bring into a rehearsal if I need, or yeah, something I can point out, circle something that I'm struggling with. I think it's super therapeutic and it really helps me catch all of the nuances. I would miss so much if I wasn't choosing to transcribe. I transcribe for every single gig.
Well, you said that it might be easier just to ear it out, but I mean, what you're doing when you transcribe is you're earing it out. You're listening. You're
Right.
listening to it all. You're just taking it one step further and putting it down into to writing. So
Exactly. It is one extra step, but I think maybe I
that's
should
what
do
counts.
maybe I should do an experiment and see how fast I could prep for a gig. Just earing it out or transcribing, but I can't really let go of transcribing. It's like my favorite part of the prep.
Well, don't like link it back to this conversation if you don't get the gig because all
Yeah.
you did was ear it out. I don't want to be responsible for that.
No, don't worry. I put myself through many tests before walking into a rehearsal. I am pretty rigid about my process. I make sure I have recorded myself playing along to it at least 4 or 5 times, and I listen to it all the time. I make sure it sounds the way I want to hear it back. It sounds like the studio.
Wow,
Otherwise,
that's great.
I'd just be guessing if I didn't do that.
Yeah, no, can't do that either.
I know, and I have had to do that because I've been called in for a couple projects with only days notice and I don't have time to sit down and record. Even though if I have like an hour before I need to fly out, I will do it. It'll usually be the last thing I do before I leave for a tour or rehearsals because I'm just a little neurotic about it. But yeah, it's the way for me, for
No, it
sure.
works. Well,
Yeah.
I'm curious. Has there been anything that you dreamt about, you wondered about while growing up pertaining to being a professional musician where the actual reality is much different than what you had supposed it to be?
Um I don't know. It's all kind of checked out to what I thought it was going to be. The only things I ever thought about as a kid was being on stage, and I didn't really know about anything else that was involved. I didn't know what the drives would be like, what the hangs would be like, what going to 1,000 gas stations would be like. I thought about the sound checks, but most of everything has been a mystery to me until I started doing it. So there weren't any high expectations where I'm like, oh, I'm sharing a room. I thought I would, have my own room and be able to do this. No, it's like this is what it is, and it's all been totally fine. Even the bumps in the road have been okay, and I haven't expected it to be any different.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, so I got a couple more quick questions for you. I saw on your Instagram that you recently had posted about playing on the new Ghost of Vroom album.
Yes.
And it seemed like from the sound of it, you were incredibly enthusiastic. What was that recording experience like for you?
Oh my God, it was amazing. It was really my first time properly staying in LA. I had only ever been for one day, not even a full night, just one day. So that in itself was awesome. And I got to connect with a lot of friends that I hadn't seen in a while because we had split up due to COVID. So this was right, right after things opened up. It was June of 2021. So I was flying again. I was prepping for something again. And yeah, it was awesome. The studio was at Mario Caldado Jr.'s house. And he has an amazing setup.
Wait, dude from
And
Beastie Boys?
yeah, exactly.
Okay,
He's a
cool.
producer. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I should
Wow.
correct myself, Mario. I say Mario. That's what we say in Long Island. So, and I get.
Well, wait. So did Ad Rock or Mike D show up? Did they come out? Did they come down to hang?
No. But Money Mark has played with us on the residency shows that I've done with Mike Doty, which has been amazing. Super cool guy. So kind of, hovering around that scene, but yeah, it was an awesome experience. Mike really trusted me, which is just crazy because I started with him when I was 19 and he's an absolute legend. He's been doing this since 95 and
with the band Soul Coughing for people who don't know.
With Soul Coughing. Yes. Yeah. And he brought me on that reunion tour and I was a huge fan of that album. So his trust has meant the world and I was so stoked he wanted to put me on this record. So he sent me all the drum loops that were sick and he let me embellish on them and trusted me to do them a service and bring them to life. And he let me be creative in the studio, which was cool. And I hope he'll have me back and it'll be even better next time because I won't be as timid. It was really like the first proper record that I was hired to play on, and now it's finally out 2 years later.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you mentioned when you recorded it, I thought, wait a minute, what am I missing? Because you just posted about this. So it just came out.
It was a long time ago. Yes. Yeah. It was, before I really started touring super frequently. And yeah, it was awesome. They let me do whatever I want. They let me put all my Meinl cymbals up and just get experimental and put a bunch of moon gel on the rides. I had the 18-inch medium crash, and I put a bunch of moon gel on it for like one of the little breakdowns between songs. So
I bet that sounded pretty funky.
It did. They let me have fun. It meant a lot.
That's awesome. Well, okay,
Yeah.
Last question for you. What's next for you? Here's your chance to shamelessly self-promote and plug and let everybody know all about what's next.
Yeah, I mean, we're coming up on the fall, and I have a couple festival gigs with Big Wild next week. So we're playing Music Midtown, Cascade in Oregon, and Equinox in Arkansas. So just a little cross-country festival run, which I'm very excited about. I played with them last year, and I'm so happy they're having me back. And then right after that, I'm going to be not sleeping very much. I'm going straight to Boston to do a week of shows with Boy Genius in the Northeast. And then I have a couple weeks off, and I play another festival with Big Wild. I do Hollywood Bowl with Boy Genius, and then I start a 3-week tour with Ghost of Vroom. And that's going to be hitting the Midwest and East Coast. And that's it. That's it for the year.
Wow. And then did Ghost of Vroom did they do any adjusting to their schedule to accommodate your schedule? Or did it just work out that way?
It almost works out. I will just be missing all of the rehearsals. So that's something we still have to talk about. I don't know if we're just waiting to see what happens, but that's going to require me to be very prepared for myself and for them to not be freaked out that we will maybe only be rehearsing for half a day. So it seems like they trust me to let me come in missing all of the rehearsals.
Yeah, I mean, just tell them to listen to this podcast. Like, dude, she transcribes.
Yeah.
She's good.
Dude, I transcribe. It's fine. But I'm going to need to get really creative for that one. So I will be hunkered down in my basement for most of October, figuring that set out, which I'm very excited for.
That's awesome. Madden, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. It was very kind of you to take time out of your day for this.
Thanks for having me. This was so fun.
Thanks for listening to Meinl Radio. If you liked what you've heard, please remember to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Give us a rating as well on Apple Podcasts, if that's what you're listening to this on. Also, go to meinlcymbals.com or go to meinlstickandbrush.com or go to both of them and sign up for our email newsletters to keep up with everything that's going on in our Meinl world. Thanks. Take care.
like a willow bend down. Put the needle on the record and you spin it around. Well, I felt like money when I woke up, and you asked me if I ever drank the loneliness cup, and now